What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I am very excited to bringing you one of my favorites. This is the Spyderco Native 5. This is the G10 version, but it is a newer version that actually comes in CPM S30V and without the steel liners. You'll see there it's just the steel lockback. Traditionally, or actually the most recent variation of this knife, the S35 VN model came with liners that extended all the way out to the outside of the knife. Now, I believe the S110V version still does have those liners, but as far as this, the G10 production version has moved to S30V and without liners. Guys, I wanted to point out real quick before we start the video, I have a ton of stuff coming this week. Actually, there's a ton of stuff coming to the channel in general, but there's a ton coming this week. So there'll be regular uploads this week of overviews and reviews. There'll be unboxings, and from now on I'm going to be doing Saturday uploads, so no more weekends without an upload from me. I'm going to be doing at least one upload on the weekends from now on. So if you are new to this channel, what I do is laid back knife overviews, generally just discussion, and kind of my thoughts on popular models and some new stuff. We do expensive stuff, we do inexpensive stuff, but if all that sounds great, then this might be the channel for you, so stick around. Let's start off doing some measurements on this guy. Overall length on the Native 5, on the this new version. We've got an overall length of just shy of 7 inches, looks to be 6.8, which I believe is the official measurement, 6.8 inches overall. Let's do the blade. Blade length looks like right at 3 inches for the overall blade length, but the cutting edge is exactly, it looks to be exactly 2.5, which again, I think is also matching up exactly with the official measurements there. Now the weight on this guy, that's one of the important topics. This knife weighs 3.7 ounces, which is down from, correct me if I'm wrong guys, I think it's 4.7, another ounce on the one with the liners. Now that's a big deal, and I think it will be a big deal for a lot of people, because one of the biggest complaints with the Native 5 was that it was simply too heavy given the overall size of the knife. 4.7 ounces is, of course, in my opinion, not really all that heavy, but to a lot of people, they kind of do this, usable cutting edge to weight ratio, and they decide, do I want that type of footprint and weight in my pocket for how much usable cutting edge I get? I get that, I get it. But for me, it doesn't start to be a problem until it starts to get a lot heavier. So for those of you who count every ounce in your pocket and you're interested in the Native 5, this should be an interesting video for you, because this lighter version, I'm going to make it tempting for you. So let's do some size comparisons here real quick. Of course, we'll start off with the Ontario Rat Model 1. The Ontario Rat Model 1 coming in at 8.6 inches. So you can see there, quite a bit bigger than the Native. Just because I've got the Inkosi in my pocket today, we'll go ahead and do the Inkosi. Having a lot of fun EDCing the Inkosi. For those of you who are wondering. Inkosi coming in at 8.4 inches overall. How about the Paramilitary 2? Paramilitary 2 coming in at 8.3 inches, 8.4 inches overall, something in there. Spyderco Shaman coming in at 8.25 inches overall. There's an interesting size comparison there. The Shaman was actually based on the Native 5. So it's kind of a big brother, little brother thing here. You can see the similarities there, though they've kind of brought this part back on the Shaman. It used to be a little bit more pointy here, and they've also brought down the total height of the blade in comparison with the handle. Other things, of course, they moved to a compression lock on the Shaman, and there's some contouring there too, but really, really interesting. If you've never handled the Native 5 and you like the Shaman, you might like the Native 5 for some of the same reasons, if size isn't, if you don't need the biggest knife in the world. Next size comparison, how about the Benchmade Griptilian? Griptilian coming in at just shy of 8 inches. I want to say it's probably 7.9 inches overall, something like that. And last but not least, we have a lot of size comparisons on this channel. The Spyderco Delica. Spyderco Delica coming in at, geez, what is this? Probably just shy of 7 inches, maybe 7 inches overall. I honestly can't remember on the Delica, but, these two are very close in size. They're both lockbacks. If you enjoy the Delica and you've been eyeing the Native 5, You know, I'll give you, I'm going to give you some reasons why you might enjoy the native. Let's go over the anatomy of the knife here real quick. We've got a very nice, typical Spyderco flat ground drop point blade with a little bit of a swedge up there. It's not perfectly flat ground like the Manix 2, and it's also a different swedge than what comes on the Shaman. You can see there the Shaman has a little bit of a flat. There's not really a flat on the Native 5. It's just a little swedge. That creates for a pretty thin tip, though I don't know, you know, given the overall length of the blade, the blade itself is going to be pretty strong. You know, generally with a shorter blade, you get a little bit more rigidity. But then again, I'm not an expert on blade geometry, so take what I say with a grain of salt. You've got a nice sort of, it's kind of a flat, semi-reflective finish. It's kind of like what comes on the G10 version of the standard Manix. It's nice. It's nice to look at. It is going to pick up fingerprints a little bit, as you can see there. Not quite stonewashed, but not really satin either. You've got the thumb hole, which of course is serving for a perfect opening mechanism and is not going to get in the way or not going to be in the cutting path of whatever you're cutting. You've got simple peel-ply textured G10 handles that are black, very you know, normal for Spyderco. You've got a simple Spyderco Torx head pivot there. You've got some piece of floating hardware there that is probably critical to the backlock here. And then you've got typical Spyderco body screws. On the other side, you have much of the same with the standard Spyderco pocket clip, which I love. You know, this is one of my favorite pocket clips ever. I think it's worth noting that this is one of those knives that is truly an ambidextrous multi pocket clip positionable knife, meaning you can put the pocket clip in any position, tip up, tip down, right or left-handed, and it is truly right or left-handed given that the backlock is right in the center of the blade. So I guess for lefties or for people who prefer a different pocket clip position, you're going to be happy with this knife no matter what. Very, very sturdy construction, even without the liners. So that's pretty cool. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about the, actually, you know what? Let's do the cut test here real quick, since a lot of times I will put that all the way to the end of the video. So we'll go ahead and get the piece of paper here and do 3 passes like normal. There's pass number 1, pass number 2, and pass number 3. Of course, being a brand new Spyderco, this knife has no issue slicing through paper. It is not quite as slicey as, say, you know, the Manix 2 or the PM2, but keep in mind with those knives, which, by the way, the Manix 2 has the same blade stock thickness of 0.125 or 0.13. Those knives have a wider or taller blade, so there's more room to drop towards the cutting edge. So this is not the sliciest knife in the world, but it is absolutely 100% still slicey enough to give you that satisfaction as it glides through material, and absolutely capable of tackling any regular EDC tasks, and up to, in my opinion, probably some heavier tasks. We'll talk about that as well. This knife came centered, as you can see there, if my camera will focus. Came centered. There were no issues on the blade or the edge or any of the handles. I got this, actually we got this. This is David's knife again. Thank you, David, for allowing me to show this on the channel. He got this off Amazon and it came perfect there. So no issues whatsoever with the fit and finish. Everything came flawless. That's something that you should generally expect from the Golden, Colorado USA earth plant from Spyderco. The knife has a, well, what you can call a free drop action with the lockback. It locks up perfectly solid, no blade play up, down, left, or right, and deploys smoothly with a smooth dropping action once you release the lockback. Let's move on to ergonomics, which is actually one of my favorite things about this knife. General ergonomics are good, but also I love that this is such a small knife that you can get a full purchase on. In the standard position, I've got medium, large size hands. In the standard position, this is really just a 3-finger position knife, and in that grip, it is plenty sturdy. You know, this jimping back here, which is not really a thumb ramp, it's really just a flat spot that's got some, you know, the typical Spyderco jimping on there. It is going to grab your finger, and that's fine. But up here in the forward choil position, which is, again, you know, I love forward choils. In this position, this is awesome. You have a 2.5-inch cutting edge, but you can get your whole hand around that knife. So talk about a feeling of control with this little guy. Some people don't like that. Some people want to maximize their cutting edge. I will always sacrifice some cutting edge to get this. I love that because the amount of pressure that I feel like I can get on that initial spot on the blade, given that my finger is right up next to it, and the amount of control that I feel with this knife is just, it's second to none. Truthfully, this is one of the smallest knives. Actually, I think it is the smallest knife that feels that incredibly secure. So I absolutely love that. I think that's amazing. Ergonomics in general are really good. You've got this sort of, you know, cutout area right there that keeps everything comfortable. You know, it is kind of a blocky looking knife and it's fairly thick for how small it is, but there's not really any hot spots except for the clip. This is a small enough knife where the standard Spyderco clip is actually going to create a little bit of a hot spot for some people. But just like always, I have to point this out, guys. The only people that's really going to affect are people who use their knives fairly hard every single day. If you're holding the knife, if every day you're going to hold this knife like this and you're going to bear down on it and you're going to cut over and over and over and over again, then yeah, that's going to bother you. But if you're like me and you work in an office or you just, you know, you have a pocket knife that you get out and you use maybe 2 to 3 times a day, then no, that's never going to bother you. And that's not even something that you should consider when you're buying a pocket knife. Most of the time, you know, the only thing that I consider when thinking about the pocket clip on a knife is, do I think that pocket clip is ugly? But for the most part, in my EDC scenarios, the pocket clip only serves one purpose. It has to keep the knife clipped to my pants, and I don't want too much to stick out. And that's an aesthetic thing. But as far as like whether or not it's a hot spot, I don't really care because I use my pocket knife minimally throughout the day. Then again, everybody's different. Some people actually do use their knives all day, every day. If you're one of those people, keep that pocket clip in mind. It may be that an aftermarket clip that rides differently is going to be more ideal for you if you absolutely want to go with this knife. So overall, ergos are great. Next thing, price on this guy. That's the topic of controversy. I just checked and they used to be $145. They've actually gone up to $150. Let me tell you, at $145, this thing was overpriced to begin with, and Spyderco is like doing this thing right now where like everything is getting a little, they're kind of creeping up on the price on a lot of stuff, and I don't really like that because, you know, everybody loves Spyderco for what is normally perceived to be as very fair prices. So the Native 5 G10, you know, I know you can get the lightweight one right now still for like $90 or something like that. And I don't like FRN. If you like FRN, go for that one, but I like the G10 models. $150 for S30V and a G10 lockback? Nah, I don't think so. Not when you can get the Paramilitary 2 for $140, used to be $135, and the Manix 2 for like $115, $120 in its base form. I don't know why this is priced the way that it is. I don't think that it should be. I think this knife should run $110, $120 at most. You know, I'm saying that, but I've also bought the original version and I've also bought the S110V version. So, you know, for me, I can justify the price, but I know full well that most people do not want to spend that much for this kind of knife. So keep that in mind when you're buying it, or if you're considering buying it. Carry philosophy, the type of people that I think would enjoy carrying this knife, people who are looking for a knife that is very durable, very dependable, been for the most part going to be used maybe in an office environment or in an environment where you're not really going to need to pull out a knife and use it very much. And if you do, you're kind of wanting it to not be the craziest thing in the world in terms of size and, you know, the way you deploy it. This isn't going to be a knife that you're going to flip out. You know, it doesn't have that thing where you know, are really going to be able to fire it out like that. It's going to need to be opened slowly and manually. And it's a small knife and it's a lockback knife, one that people who aren't knife people are generally not going to be afraid of. But at the same time, maybe you want a knife that makes you feel just a little bit more prepared than a small EDC knife like the Delica. Maybe you want a knife that if you were, in an odd scenario where you needed to use a knife really hard for a little bit, maybe you want that preparedness. In that scenario, that exact scenario, I think the Native 5 is awesome. And I love that. That's how I think. Generally, I do light, tiny tasks with my knives, but I like to carry something that I feel like in a crazy situation where I just I need a tool and all I've got is my pocket knife. I like to know that, I feel like that knife could handle a little bit more. And I feel like the Native 5 absolutely can handle a little bit more than your standard lightweight EDC knife. The reason I think that, despite this not having full steel liners, it does have a very substantial backlock. You can see there it extends all the way to the bottom, whereas on the Delica it only extends halfway. That is doing this knife justice both in rigidity and in structural integrity. On top of that, these slabs of G10 are fairly thick. In fact, they're about as thick as, well, I don't have the Manix 2 on the table, but you can see there next to the Shaman, we're fairly close. Paramilitary 2, also fairly close. And next to the Shaman, it actually is the exact same thickness, which is interesting. Now, I know thickness doesn't always have to do with durability and blah, 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 but you do get that feeling of just, rigidity and solidity with this knife, with it being it's not super chunky, but it is a little bit chunky. Also, the feeling that you get when it locks out and how solid it locks out. This blade is not going anywhere. You could torque as much as you want on that blade, and it is not going to move. This thing feels tough, and I really like that about such a small, stubby knife. I don't necessarily need it to be this massive, hulking knife with this long 4 1/4 inch blade to feel like I can get real work done with it. In fact, a lot of things that you would do with a pocket knife, even in hard use situations, really only require a short blade. And that's why I like this knife so much. I feel like the range of things that it can accomplish are massive, even considering it's such a small knife. At 3.7 ounces and under 7 inches, that is awesome. I love that. I think this is one of the best ratios that are out there in terms of footprint in your pocket to what it can accomplish and what you can use it for. Now, when I say hard use, I mean how much force can I put? How much can I bear down on this thing over and over when cutting through very thick or dense material, something that you would actually use a knife for? Wood, rubber, things like that, thick rope. I mean, that when I say hard use, that's what I'm talking about. Can you bear down on this knife really hard and push and cut through, with those heavy pressure cuts? Absolutely. I think the Native 5 is a great knife for that, and it also makes a great office carry knife. So that's about where I'm at on the carry philosophy. Let's talk about likes and dislikes. Truthfully, there's only a couple of things that I don't like about this, and I've kind of already talked about them. The pocket clip is not, it's not really in the best position, but I mean, look, that's a typical Spyderco pocket clip. The pocket clip is great. You don't have a whole lot of the knife riding out of your pants. It functions well, and unless you're going to cut super hard with it all day, every day, it's really probably not going to be that big of a deal. So it'd be nice if it was a little bit different. I definitely do not like the price. I think that kind of stinks, but if my upload here, my review or overview has given you enough reasons to justify that price, then that is your own journey, as it was mine. How much I pay for something that I see value in is entirely up to me or the individual who is also considering making that purchase. So if you feel like you can get that much use out of it, then yeah, go for it. This is an awesome knife. The only other thing that and this is kind of a half and half, could it make it better? I actually really liked the liners on the Native 5. Like the S110V version still has that. I like that. It just sort of adds to the feeling of this knife being this little hard-use tank. I don't think that without the liners you lose any durability. I do worry about one thing, and maybe I'm completely wrong here, but with there not being steel liners that come all the way up here around the pivot, the phosphor bronze washers, this is running on phosphor bronze, by the way, the phosphor bronze washers are actually running directly on G10. Now, G10 is very durable material, and it is I don't know the process of how they make it. It's fiberglass that's been woven and melted and baked or whatever. It's very durable. And it's very resistant to expansion and contraction, liquids, chemicals, flames, stuff like that. You can actually melt it with fire. I tried. that's a different story. It takes a long time though. Surprisingly, it's very resilient to fire. But anyways, I don't know how phosphor bronze reacts to twisting and moving against G10 over time. You know, originally they were running on the steel liners, and I imagine that would serve well for longevity, but I have no idea how they're going to last against G10. This has that pivot bushing system where you can essentially, after you take the knife apart, you can crank it down all the way, and it's going to stop you at a point that is set by the factory. So it's always going to have roughly the same action with, it's going to have a break-in period, but it's always going to feel about the same. I don't know how having G10 wearing against phosphor bronze will affect that. I don't know if eventually it'll have blade play because it'll wear down, or maybe it won't wear down at all and it's not an issue. You know, if you know, comment in the comment section, because I would like to know, and I would like other people to know who are watching this video. So that's really it. Other than that, I love this knife. I think this is an amazing knife, and it absolutely will be a part of my playlist of my most recommended knives that have been on this channel, which really is, that brings me into my final conclusion that, yeah, this is an amazing knife. It's an awesome EDC knife. I have no issue whatsoever with Spyderco's decision to remove the liners on this and change the steel from S35 to S35VN to S30V. Which, by the way, their reasoning behind that, I dug into the Spyderco forums. After doing a bunch of tests, apparently they concluded that that CPM S30V, at least when heat treated the way they do it, has better edge retention than S35VN, and the differences in ease of sharpening were negligible. So they moved back to S30V. Now, in some sense, that's a shame, because I think the Native 5 is one of their last offerings in S35VN. It might actually be their last offering in S35VN for their line. I don't know. But in another sense, you know, I get it. They're thinking about the end user. They want to make sure the knife is going to perform the way that they want it to. S30 and S35 are so similar from my, from my usage experience. I don't notice the difference at all between the two. You know, the Inkosi uses S35VN, and I'm fine with that. Oftentimes, what it's going to come down to is it's more edge geometry and how it's heat treated that are going to determine, exactly, how well it performs. So S30V to S35, no, you're not losing anything. And according to Spyderco, you're getting better edge retention. S35VN is ever so slightly tougher than S30V, more resilient to chipping and things like that. And they're both stain resistant. So no, you're not losing anything. Whether it's S35 or S30V, the $145 to $150 I think is unjust. But at $110, I'd be happy with either one, just to make that more clear. So anyways, yeah, this is an excellent knife. It makes an excellent EDC. I actually do have experience with that I can back that up with. I never had issues with blade play on mine. I never had issues with the lockback not functioning correctly. I love this knife. Just keep in mind, it's not going to have that satisfactory, Spyderco flicky sort of feeling, but you do get this, bam, this bank vault type lockup feeling, when that lockback sets in. It does make this loud, like, clack. I really like that. When this clicks into place, it just feels like it is not going anywhere while you're going to use it. On top of that, couple that with the fact that you've got really, really great ergonomics and super, super amazing control of this tiny tank while you're cutting. I think this just makes for an absolutely amazing EDC pocket knife. So 100% can recommend this knife. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. And if you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So please check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, then please subscribe to my channel, because there is definitely more coming. You can follow me on Instagram at metal_complex with the exact same logo as this channel. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.